Hello, welcome to this 8th session of this course CSS for Dummies. Now we're going to talk about something called 3 ways to use CSS. So typically we have talked a little bit about CSS already, and now it's a little bit more in detail how we exactly use CSS, or in other words, how do we actually integrate CSS with our HTML. What are the 3 standard ways? We have already talked about this, so slightly you might have an already idea, but let's explore these 3 ways much more detail. Okay, so let me jump to my VS Code. So here we are. So once we are in my VS Code, we have already this file created. So let me just use this as a reference and save this as, so that we have exactly our file. So let me just save it as this. 3 ways to use css.html. So again, I'm creating HTML. Keep an eye on that. Up till now we have been creating HTML files. So now what are 3 standard ways of using CSS? Okay, so let's just come here, and if I say, for example, in this case, let's just make it lesson number 8, how to use CSS. So let me just change that. So now we have a bunch of redundant data within our CSS. I actually don't want to use it so much, so let me just get rid of some of the content so that it becomes very simple and easy. We can have a paragraph, we can have some of this line here, that should do the trick. Control S, and then all this other CSS, let me just get rid of it till this point, and then maybe be simple, because we just have 2 paragraphs, so maybe we can get rid of these 2 as well. And H3, H2, I've also got rid of it. So here we go. So the idea is just to make it simple, because I'm just copy pasting from the previous example and I don't want to have so much content here. Here we go, and let me just get rid of this as well. I don't like to use it. Now we have a simple HTML. Now there are basically 3 different ways of using CSS within your HTML. How do we do that? If I jump back to my presentation, just for your sake, now these are 3 different ways that we use our CSS. The 3 ways are known as inline CSS, internal CSS, and external CSS. Okay, when we use CSS, these are 3 different ways we can integrate CSS with HTML. Okay, one is known as inline CSS. Inline CSS means that you write the CSS right with the tag. So for example, we have a paragraph tag, and with the paragraph tag I use a style attribute, and then I give a particular CSS code within the style attribute. Now style is an attribute, it's a CSS HTML attribute. That's why we use the word attribute. Keep an eye on that. Whenever we talk about something called attributes, basically we are talking in terms of HTML. Whenever we're talking in terms of CSS, we are talking in terms of properties. So whenever we use word property, basically means we are CSS. So this color is a property, this is CSS, this is a property value, so this becomes a CSS. Style is an attribute that is associated with a tag. So this, because it's an attribute, we use it for HTML. Technically same things, right? So you can use word attributes or properties or functions or parameters, whatever you call them, but because these are 2 different languages, we use these words in a different manner, just to identify what we are talking about or which tool we are talking about. Okay, so that's the clarification that's there. So inline CSS is a CSS that we use within the tag itself. We use paragraph tag, and then within the tag we specify style attribute, and then we give a certain style. This becomes my inline CSS. Internal CSS is something that we use with the head tag. So within my head tag of a body, I write another tag called style. Now this is again something we used in previous example as well. Okay, so what we do is we use head tag. Inside a head tag we give a style tag. Now here style behaves like an attribute, here style behaves like a tag. Within this style tag we gave a specific selector, block start, block close, and then we gave the attribute a property name and its property value. Here, because we are using inline CSS, there is no need of a style tag because we have already a style attribute. Then there is no name of selector because we are already using it inside a paragraph tag. So this will only be applied to this paragraph only. That's the inline CSS major property that we use. So this will not be shared across different paragraphs. However, if you use internal CSS, this attribute will now be shared across multiple attributes or multiple tags, sorry. So this property will be shared with multiple attributes. This becomes my internal CSS. The third way of doing it is called external CSS, where you actually write the CSS code in an external file and then link that external file with your HTML code using a link tag. So we use a link tag we provided a relation, for example, called style sheet. This tells our browser that this is an external file that has a style sheet relation to my HTML file. And then we use hrefs and provide the path to the external CSS. Let me show you these three things how we do in VS Code. In my VS Code, we have this basic code written, a simple class file. Okay, so remember last time we did this code, so we have an h1 tag. Okay, if there's an h1 tag, I use the style attribute. We provided it a color, Control S. So we have this, for example, paragraph tag already. So what if I want to give a inline CSS here? So I use a style as an attribute, and then I can say, for example, alignment. Okay, or for example, I can say text align, and it can be center, Control S. Now remember, we have internal CSS as well. Okay, but this internal CSS does not have an align attribute associated with it. It just has color, which is supposed to be blue. However, we have given a color, or we don't have any color here. Let me give you example what it means. So let me just show you exactly how, if I run this code first and show you what this behavior looks like. Okay, so let's just go live here from my VS Code, and here we go. So now you can see this, we have a basic attribute associated with my paragraph, and it is aligned center. So this is a center alignment for my paragraph 1 because I have provided this text. Okay, so this is inline CSS. Inline CSS has there. Now remember, we have a blue color, but what if I don't like blue color here? So I come here and I say color, simple. So this is a CSS attribute, and let me make it, for example, let me choose this color here, Control S. So now what should happen? I have an inline CSS that says color is there, but remember, this paragraph has also a CSS in internal CSS, which we have defined inside the head tag. So inside the head tag, we have a style attribute. Inside the style attribute, we have this paragraph. So this becomes inline CSS. Inline CSS is basically internal CSS is basically written inside your HTML page, inside your head. Inline CSS you write inside the tag. If you save it, go back to your page, now this is green color. The second paragraph becomes blue. Okay, so why this is green? Because we have applied a green attribute here, a green property here. Why again is there green color whereas the second paragraph is blue? That's one main reason. The inline CSS, the CSS that we write with the tag, has a higher precedence. Whatever we write here will always be executed last and will be shown as a result. Whatever we write here will execute first, so the text will be converted to blue, but then when this tag is being executed, this will execute at the end, and the final style will be this. That's why we say the inline CSS has a higher precedence. Again, by higher precedence means no matter what the CSS is specified in internal line file, final result will always be overridden because of inline CSS. The final result will always be shown if there is an inline CSS. If there is no inline CSS, in this case, nothing is shown. Okay, so this becomes inline. So whenever we want to use CSS, this is the first way. We use style attribute, we give a CSS here. Second way, we use the style tag, and we specify this attributes here, and then we simply use the selector and we bracket close bracket start bracket close, and then the CSS style goes here. So this is what basically CSS is. If it is internal, it has to have a selector, it has to have a block start, block close, it has to have this code here. Okay, then internal inline CSS is just very simple. You don't need any selector because we are already using inside a paragraph tag. It needs to have a semicolon, yes, because you are using multiple styles, multiple properties within our CSS, so you need to provide that. Okay, so that's a two-way. The third way we discussed was called external. What happens if you are using multiple web pages? For example, in a website, typically you would have 5 to 10 different web pages or 100 pages. For example, CNN.com has thousands of pages. Your university website can contain hundreds of pages. News websites contain hundreds and thousands of pages. Blogs contains thousands of blogs. So how do we maintain the consistent style throughout hundreds and thousands of pages? Then if you need to change, how do you change it? If you use internal CSS, inline CSS, if I talk about first, inline CSS has to be written with every single tag. With every single tag, you need to write CSS. Okay, so you can control the design, but you can control it at a very micro level, at a tag level. Then we basically go to internal CSS. Internal CSS again has to be written inside every HTML file. If you have 100 HTML files, this same CSS needs to be copied and pasted in every single file. And then if you have to change something, again 100 files have to be opened and edited all the time, which is again a huge task. So this is where the third type of CSS comes into play. So what we do is we create a new file, blank, and then we specify a tag name, for example paragraph, and that's it. And then we write a style attributes, for example the color is equals to colon, and then it can be, for example, green. Okay, and then we say here's my green color, and then every tag or every attribute that you want to apply on a particular tag, you just write the selector name, give a block start, block close, and then you write its CSS attributes. Okay, that's it. So the code is exactly same as you write inside your style tag, however without the style tag, because now we are not writing HTML, we are giving it a CSS. So this becomes my external CSS. So idea here is very simple. You write the code in a separate file. The CSS code is basically written in a separate file. You go and you control S and save it. So wherever you have saved your main source code, inside this I write the file name, for example style.css. so now here the extension I have used CSS. Up till now we have been using .html as an extension, but because now we are changing the CSS, we are using .css as an extension. Click on save and voila, now this becomes my CSS code saved in a separate style sheet. The only thing is it's still not linked here. Okay, so I can just easily come here and I can copy this entire code and then I paste it here and remove it from here, no problem with that. Okay, but no need, sometimes we use internal as well to have that customization on a single page. Because we have used an external CSS, now we need to apply it. If I execute this code, nothing would happen because currently this is a separate file. The CSS is in a separate file. Because it's in a separate file, again remember, no style tag. All other CSS rules apply. You can use the tags as a selector, you can use a .class as a selector, you can use hash as an ID for a selector, all same. And then you need to block start, block close. You need to provide a property, semicolon, property its value, semicolon, it can have multiple properties. All the CSS basically goes exactly the same way. However, now the only thing is remaining is you need to use something called a link tag. So inside your head, before the head tag is closed, we use a tag called link. Now this is again HTML. This is not CSS. We use the HTML tag to write this style tag. Okay. So now what we have told our HTML page that hang on, this is a HTML page that is linked to a style sheet, and the path of that style sheet is style.css. Now because I have saved the style.css in same folder as my original HTML file, I don't need to provide any other path notation here. For now I just provided it the basic syntax. Okay, so I said okay, style.css. so this is what basically the link tag does. Now link is a tag of HTML. It has many purposes. It is used for many different purposes as well. It can use for linking your external JavaScript. It can be used to link your external fonts library or your bootstrap library and so on and so forth. So in this case, we are using it for CSS. So that's why we are telling our browser that, hey bro, we are using a link tag and we are linking a style sheet. So that's where the relation attribute is there for. It's like a metadata telling my browser that I'm going to link a style sheet and here's the path of that style sheet. So now this will link my CSS, this external CSS. Where's here? I don't want to save this. Where is it? Oh, here it is. So I want to link my external CSS with this page. So let me just control S and go back here, hit a refresh and see this. Now we have a different style. What's happening now here is, so if I go back here, because now we have used 3 CSS, so you need to understand exactly what's happening. Remember, there are 3 ways of using this CSS. So inline, internal and external. In terms of precedence, it's extremely important to understand that inline has the highest precedence. No matter what, this code will always have the final effect. Then internal CSS, then external has the lowest effect. So for example, if you have a paragraph tag that has a style in external, then you define an internal and you execute the code, whatever is the style defined in your internal will be shown in your paragraph, because internal will override the external. Okay. Then if the same paragraph is now has an inline CSS as well, the final result will be shown of the inline CSS. Whatever attribute or property is being changed there will have that effect, because inline will override internal. So inline has the highest precedence, then internal, then external. If I go back inside my code, remember inside this I have a paragraph that has color, this green color. Then I also have a paragraph in my inline that has a blue color. If I come here and in this paragraph tag, what if I say example, the color can be yellow, okay, and I can say let me use it as a yellow. Okay, so if I save it, go back inside my code, go back inside my code here. So now it has a yellow color. Why it has a yellow color? Because I have used a external CSS defining that this tag is supposed to have a yellow color. So now whatever attributes you define here will be basically properties you define here will be used here. So up till now we have discussed the basic syntax, the selectors, and how we use the CSS. Now finally what we need to learn about CSS are these CSS properties. That's it. Now all other CSS is basically concerned with knowing what you want to achieve using what different properties. So let's start exploring some of these properties in future classes. Okay.